Well, I'm wearing my Navy shirt in honor of the second chapter of my autobiography, my chapter 2, my Navy life, BC Navy life. And that picture there at the end, that's a picture of me at 18 years old, the fellow without the hat. Boatmate seaman on USS Kleinsmith, a landing craft. Carried 88 recon Marines and a SEAL team. Well, it was UDT back then, underwater demolition team, but they evolved into SEALs. So anyway, let me jump right in this chapter so we can get a whole chapter done. And on January 13th, 1958, I was sworn into the United States Navy in San Francisco, California. We all spent the night in a San Francisco hotel courtesy of Uncle Sam. After breakfast the next morning, we were bused to the then very small San Francisco International Airport and flown to San Diego. Anything you may have seen in Officer and Gentleman or Steel Jacket or any other Hollywood depiction does not hold a candle to the stark reality of coming face to face with the reality that you are at best scum and at worst a maggot, and the chief barking orders laced with obscenities now holds absolute sway over every aspect of your life. I will not dwell on the details of my boot camp experience, except to simply say that as a young man who had been making his own wages from 12 years old on, and having bought my own car at 15, this kid did not take to authoritarianism very well, especially from recruit petty officers, guys my age who just happened to have a little bit of college or something, so they were put in charge. They'd been in the same time as myself and had gotten swell-headed over being selected to fill the position. And being a fighter as well as a lover, by the way, my shipmates voted me one of the 3 toughest guys in our company, well, that simply compounded the problems. As a result, by the time Recruit Training Company 034 graduated, I had 48 regimental reports on me. It nearly caused me to be held over and not graduate with my company. But by God's, unknown to me at that time, grace, I skimmed by and I graduated. My first 8 years in the Navy drew me deeper and deeper into alcoholism and nicotine addiction. I spent my first 3 years as a boatswain seaman, sailing mainly over the Caribbean on USS Kleinsmith APD-134, and seeing how much rum I could consume in each port. On June 26, 1960, I married Myrna, my school sweetheart. This next part I share not to boast, but just to show how an absolute jerk I was in my BC days. While Myrna was pregnant with our first child, I had an affair with her best friend. Yep. In October of that year, the opportunity presented itself, and I re-enlisted early for conversion to missile technician. But they were short-handed, and the deck officer got the operations officer to hold up my clearance requests. Yep. So off I went on the ship to Westpac for 6 months of fun games and patrolling all Vietnam on Yankee Station in the South China Sea. And Yankee Station is where we were on July 2nd, 1962, when this Red Cross telegram arrived via radio. "Hi, Daddy, just arrived, weighing 7 pounds 2 ounces, measuring 21 inches long, Ralph III." Soon I found out that the ops officer was holding up my paperwork, so I complained to the captain, and he made the ops officer send my paperwork in expeditiously, so I was transferred in time to see my son at 2 weeks old. So I loaded up my little family in a 4-year-old Plymouth station wagon, and off we went to Virginia Beach, Virginia, where I attended Guided Missile A School at the base at Dam Neck, Virginia, which would later be my home for 2 more occasions. At Dam Neck, we learned basic and advanced electronics, the newly emerging transistor technology, radar special circuits, and hydraulics. After graduation, my class was sent to Regulus Sea School in Pearl Harbor, Hawaii, which translated our basic knowledge into specific applications on the air-breathing submarine-launched Regulus missile. Only one pre-World War II missile housing was available to a lower-ranked military personnel, so me, Myrna, and little Ralph moved into it and fought to keep the cockroaches under control. Upon graduation, my duty station was GMU-10, Guided Missile Unit 10. It was during this time that God saved my life 2 more times as I took 110 bolts across my heart on 2 different occasions. thanks to an ignorant shipmate, by the way. Several months later, I made Petty Officer 3rd, and we moved into much newer housing near our base. On June 22nd, Byron arrived at Tripler Army Hospital on Oahu. We really had only wanted one boy and one girl, but now we had 2 boys. Start a possible basketball team? Who knows? Still being lost as Hogan's goat, I had an affair with Myrna's new best friend. Not content with one, now another one. This nearly ended our marriage and resulted in a child whom I have never seen. Upon completion of that tour, the Navy transferred me to JMU-10 Bondet, Bottom Detachment, on Kauai, Hawaii, where I spent the next 18 months. It was on Kauai God saved my life the 5th time. I got caught in a weird riptide, weird in that it was both going out to sea and cutting crossways across the beach also. Yes, my life passed before me, and yes, I was sure I was a goner. I was also there on July 10th, 1985, my daughter Leilani Lynn arrived at Waimea Hospital in Waimea, Kauai. No more thoughts of a basketball team. Our family was completed 2 boys and 1 girl. Now then, let us fast forward to 1967, where my pre-salvation story really begins. 7 of us had graduated the 10-week computer programming school, required as a prerequisite for the 6 months Polaris A3 missile conversion school we were to attend again at Dam Neck, Virginia. Now we were about to graduate from Polaris School. My orders were for the Simon Lake, USS Simon Lake AS-33, stationed in the Holy Loch in Scotland off the Firth of Clyde. By this time, Myrna and I had 3 children. Ralph III was 6 now, Byron was 4, and Leilani was 2. And we were a little concerned as we really needed a 3-bedroom house, which is almost unheard of in Scotland unless you bought. But rentals were all 1 and 2 bedrooms. The Navy gave families up to 90 days temporary lodging allowance, above and beyond their normal housing allowance, to cover the very expensive temporary lodging, often hotels, that was available. One afternoon I came home from school and my wife said, "The neighbors loaned us a game." And what to my wondering eyes did appear? And a Ouija board complete with demons in the gear. That night after we put the kids to bed, we set up the game board and started playing around with it. Even though we barely touched the plancet, it fairly flew across the board answering our questions. But finally I said, even though we are barely touching the plancet, we are asking questions to which we know the answers, so we may be influencing the answers to questions we already know by questions we already know. So I asked the Ouija board, will we have any trouble finding a house? Ouija said no. Will we find a house before our TLA runs out? Ouija said yes. How many bedrooms will it have? Ouija said 3. With this, we put the board away and the next day gave it back to our neighbors with a thank you, and we never played with a Ouija board again. But I filed the answers in my memory. My wife and children came to Scotland a couple weeks after me, as she was born in Canada and had some problems getting her U.S. passport. But the good thing was it allowed me to secure a cute, cozy little cottage, which did not eat up much of our TLA. And also the TLA did not start until they arrived and we actually moved into the cottage. So we began pursuing every lead to go searching for a house. But every lead turned out to be a dead end. First month, nothing. Second month, nothing. By the beginning of the last week of the 3rd month, I was ready to apply for my first month's extension and thinking, so much for the Ouija board, a bunch of hooey. About 6 days before the end of my 90 days, we handled missiles late and I missed my bus. So I grabbed a taxi. The driver and I entered the conversation. He asked, "Have you found a house yet?" I said, "No, I have to apply for TLA extension this week." He said, "Let me talk to my sister." Says she owns the flat we grew up in and has not wanted to rent it since our mom passed away 7 years ago, so let me see if she's willing to rent it out. The next day he watched for me to come off the pier, and when I got off the Liberty boat, he said, "Get in and let me take you to meet my sister Donna at the flat." It was a second floor, 3-bedroom flat, right on the waterfront in Duneud on a main bus route. Now let me show you how Satan works. Let me assure you that there are 2 things Satan absolutely cannot do. He cannot read our minds, and he cannot see the future. But what he did do was, when their mom passed away, he figured one day he might just have a use for that flat, and he, or a demon servant of his, whispered in Donna's ear, Oh, you cannot bear to see anyone else living in your mother's flat. Do not rent it out. So I gathered dust for 7 years. That's when I got into the Ouija board, and Satan said, aha, this is who I have been waiting for. And then later Tony asked her if she would rent it, and the demon once again whispered in her, go ahead, you've grieved long enough, and you could use the money. Voila, I was hooked. I spent the next 5 years in the occult as a result of a Ouija board. 100% accurate predictions, folks. 100%. Not that the predictions were accurate, but Satan and listening and having a provision made them 100%. The second thing that happened in Scotland was I began learning and eventually assisting and teaching Aikido. So in addition to my growing interest in the occult, I was now getting involved in Zen philosophy. What a crazy mixture, huh? Mormonism, witchcraft, and Zen, and still drowning it all liberally in alcohol and nicotine. In fact, although I did not realize it until after getting saved, I was a full-blown alcoholic. I had followed in that part of my daddy's footsteps perfectly. When I got to Scotland, I could not stand the taste of gin. 3 years later, I could drink it straight. Less than half jokingly, my drinking buddy Gary and I would tell people when they said we were alcoholics, nah, alcoholics have to go to meetings, and that uses up too much valuable drinking time. We're just plain drunks. Gary used to tell people who missed one of our parties, yeah, it was a great party. We poured Ralph into his guitar case and Myrna carried him home. It all seemed pretty funny at the time, but inside I was aching for something more real. I remember it was about 1969 I began telling people, of course based on my Mormon understanding, you know, one of these days I need to clean up my act and, stop drinking and smoking and so forth and come back to Jesus. I'd never been with Jesus, but, that's the religious thing to say as a religious person. I need to clean up my act and come back to Jesus. However, I was not talking about the Jesus of Scripture, rather the Mormon Jesus who was born the twin of Lucifer and became God while Lucifer became Satan. But another thing happened in 1969 that got my attention. One night I woke from a horrible nightmare and was wringing wet with sweat. My dream was that my family and I were in a car driving up a hill when suddenly over the hill ahead there was a blinding flash and a mushroom cloud, and we went into absolute darkness. I could no longer see or hear my family, and I knew I was heading for hell. Now, it is as vivid now as it was then, but it took me 6 months to drink it out of my mind back then, and I absolutely and totally forgot it. But God would bring it back 3 years later, and we'll get to that later. So, it is on to the chapter of my conversion, but before we close this chapter, remember, I told you that in 1969, I had to rethink my favorite adage, God watches over little children and drunken sailors. Well, another very good drinking buddy of mine, Bill Bronner, was on leave in the U.S., and we got word that one night while returning from a drunken orgy with his parents to his parents' home in Pittsburgh, he ran off the Pennsylvania Pike and was killed instantly. Old life of the party Bill was gone. Now, along with my growing feeling of emptiness, was a shocking reality that I actually was not invincible. But my drinking was still growing more and more severe. Many nights I fell asleep watching TV while consuming a pitcher or two of very dry martinis. When I say very dry, I mean pour in the gin and hope someone opened a bottle of vermouth somewhere in the neighborhood. One very important point to be revisited in the next chapter was in 1968, I broke my left kneecap playing basketball. Me and a teammate were both looking over opposite shoulders as we were breaking down cross court, ran into each other, resulting in me coming down on my left knee and splitting my kneecap horizontally in two halves. The good news was that a nerve was blocked and I had no feeling in that knee. The ship's doc said it was a good because there was nothing they could do for it. But she'll visit that again in the next chapter. I hope you'll return. If you haven't seen the foreword or chapter 1, please watch them and look for chapter 3, which will be coming very soon. And thank you for coming. If you haven't already done so, please subscribe, click the like, and come back often. God bless you.